طيب بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إلى علمنا. Inshallah, this will be the first reading from the book, the Muwatta of Imaam Maalik, with the Riwaayah of Abu Mus'ab, Ahmed ibn Abi Bakr al-Qasim az-Zuhri, rahimahullah ta'ala, who died in the year 248 after the Hijrah. Where's the beginning of the book? Inshallah, our goal here, inshallah, is that we memorize from the book that which Allah makes it easy for us, and that we memorize from the book that which Allah makes easy for us, and that we go over the general meaning and general understanding. MashaAllah, this is the wrong book. That's fine. Ala kulli hal. That we go over the general meaning and the general understanding of the words in the narration and some of the sharh. Inshallah, the sharh, as we'll talk about when we read the sharh, I'll try to make my comments limited. What I would like the participation to be is that we read some sharh on our own. None of us have to read the same sharh, but all of us try to read some sharh on our own. And that way, when we come to class, we can benefit each other with something that the other person might have not have read. So that way we can benefit the person with something we can benefit each other with something the other person might not have read. Because as we'll see, the shuruh of the Muwatta are abundant, just as the different versions of the Muwatta are numerous. And so if we all memorize and take from a sharh whatever is on the level that you feel comfortable with, whether it be a video sharh or an audio sharh of one of the mashayikh or another student, whether it be that which has been written. And the Muwatta has over 100 different written explanations. If all of us just do what we can individually and then come back when we get together, then we can add comments and benefit each other with something that we might have benefited from one of the various books. As far as what we'll use as the foundation, then I decided that the best foundation that we might use as a foundation for the explanation is the sharh of Abdul Karim al-Khudayr, hafidhullah ta'ala. And that was for a couple of reasons. One, it's also recorded. So for the person who gets that sharh, they can follow along with his teaching it. And because the book is in reality just a transcription of the lessons that he gave live, it can help your listening as you're learning Arabic to be able to read along and see a lot of the things as well. And so if you're listening to his sharh while you're reading it, there'll be discrepancies, but you'll be able to follow along with a lot of things. And that can help your comprehension, the fact that you can actually see it on paper while you're listening. And as it relates to Arabic, we all know that the maharat, the skills that are needed to improve your Arabic are listening, speaking, writing, and comprehension. And so all four of these skills need to be trained, or you need to train all four of these skills as you're working to improve your Arabic. And so being able to listen and read to the same thing, you're able to double down on that. So, and also him being one of the contemporary scholars and one of the major scholars of our time period, then he's someone who we feel comfortable with the information that he presents, that he'll present it to us in a way that is suitable for our mustawa, for our level that we are on right now. And it gives us a connection. But as we'll talk about, the explanation of Abdul Karim al-Khudayr and many others is in reality an explanation of a different riwayah. It's an explanation of a different riwayah, the riwayah of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi al-Masmudi. And so there'll be discrepancies from the hadith that he's explaining from that which we have in our riwayah, the riwayah of Abu Mus'ab az-Zuhri. And so when we come across situations like that, then I'll try to put effort into tracking down explanations of those narrations, whether they are in other versions of the Muwatta, the explanations of other versions of the Muwatta, or in other hadith and other books in general. Naam. So what we'll do every week, inshallah, is that we'll start with those who memorize doing a tasmi', right? Our goal is to memorize. That's the primary objective of this, to have something that we can busy and preoccupy ourselves with, that inshallah will be a decoration for us in this life as well as the life to come, right? Having a connection to this book, and even more than that, besides just having a chain or an ijaza, if you will, having the permission that you've heard the book before, actually going over the entirety of it, having a sama', and even more than that, having the ability to memorize what Allah makes it easy for us to memorize from it. Then this is a decoration for us in this life, and inshallah a rif'ah, an elevation for us in the life to come. And so I'll start inshallah this riwayah. Qala Abu Mus'ab az-Zuhri rahimahullah ta'ala قال حدثنا مالك بن أنس عن ابن شهاب أن عمر بن عبد العزيز أخر الصلاة يوما فدخل عليه عروة بن الزبير فأخبره أن المغيرة بن شعبة أخر الصلاة يوما وهو بالكوفة فدخل عليه أبو مسعود الأنصاري فقال ما هذا يا مغيرة أليس قد علمت أن جبريل نزل فصلى رسول الله ثم صلى 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 فصلى رسول الله ثم قال بهذا أمرت. قال عمر لعروة اعلم ما تحدث يا عروة إن جبريل هو أقام لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وقت الصلاة ولا أوقات الصلاة؟ وقت الصلاة. فقال عروة كذلك كان بشير بن أبي مسعود يحدث عن أبيه. قال عروة وحدثتني عائشة زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يصلي العصر والشمس في حجرتها قبل أن تظهر. صحيح؟ قال عروة ولقد حدثتني عائشة زوجنا. أحسن الله إليكم. يلا تفضل. أيوة.
حدثنا أبو مسعود أحمد بن أبي بكر قال حدثنا مالك بن أنس عن ابن شهاب أن عمر بن عبد العزيز أخبر صلاة يوم فدخل عليه عروة بن الزبير فأخبره أن المغيرة بن شعبة أخر صلاة يوم وهو بالكوفة فدخل عليه أبو مسعود الأنصاري فقال ما هذا يا مغيرة؟
أليس قد
علمت أن جبريل نزل وصلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم صلى رسول الله ثم صلى رسول الله ثم صلى رسول الله ثم صلى رسول الله ثم قال بهذا أمرت. قال عمر بعروة
اعلم
أن تحدث
ما تحدث
يا عروة إن جبريل هو أقام الصلاة
وأقام
لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وقت الصلاة. فقال عروة كذلك كان بشير بن أبي مسعود. قال
يحدث
تحدث
يحدث
عن أبيه قال عروة ولقد حدثتني عائشة زوج النبي أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يصلي أسره والشمس والشمس الشمس
في
والشمس في قبل في حجرتها قبل أن تدخل.
نعم. حفظت؟ لم تحفظ بعد. إن شاء الله. إن شاء الله. I'm assuming you didn't memorize it. You didn't memorize it. You just got it. طيب إن شاء الله. الدرس القادم, huh? The first two. That's why we did the first two in 1 week, huh? So in your book, it'll probably say 1 and 2, right? But all of it's really just one hadith, as we're going to talk about. It's the hadith of Urwa. So from where he says, Anna Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, all the way to where he says, like this, all the way until he says, before it left, or before it got above. I don't know how they translate it. But qabla an tadhhab, right? طيب. The sharh. Sheikh Abdul Karim al-Khudayr, hafidhahullah ta'ala. The sharh isn't too long and isn't too extensive. I'm going to read, but not focus on a word-for-word translation, just the generality. But before we do that, let's look at the hadith. Or should we end with that? Let's end with that. Let's end with the hadith vocabulary so that a person can have a better understanding after they see the general translation. The Shaykh hafidhahullah ta'ala, he says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala abdihi wa rasulihi nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. أما بعد فلا يخفى على أحد ممن ينتسب لهذا الدين أهمية سنة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعظيم منزلتها وأن حجيتها وتدوينها، ولسنا هنا بصدد الحديث عن هذا الكتاب، كما أن لسنا بحاجة إلى الإسهاب في التعريف بمؤلف الكتاب الذي نحن بصدد شرحه إن شاء الله تعالى، ولكن سنكتفي بشذرات تعريفية بالإمام مالك وموطئه. The Shaykh Hafidhahullah Ta'ala, he said after praising Allah and sending salat upon the messenger, he says that it is not hidden from anybody the importance of those who are ascribed. It is not hidden from anybody who attributes themselves to the religion, the importance of the sunnah of the messenger and its great position. And the fact that we are in need of it and in preserving it. And we are not here at this moment going to talk about the history of hadith in general, like the history of the hadith. How do we know it's a proof? How is it compiled? All of this, when they talk about, a lot of times you see when they start a book, they talk about the history of hadith. He said, we're not at this moment going to talk about the history of hadith, right? He's done it in other places. He says, just like we're not in need right now to go into long, detailed discussion introducing the author of this book. Who's the author of the book? Maalik ibn Anas. We're not in need to go into detailed discussion about the author. We already know who he is. We don't need to go into detailed discussion about the author of the book that we are about to explain, inshallah. But instead, nor do we need to go into detail about the book. But instead, we're going to just mention a couple of general points that will introduce to you who Imam Maalik is and what his book, the Muwatta, was. I say this is one of those places where you should go back and do research. Did anybody have any benefits to give us about Imam Maalik or about the Muwatta? After I read what the author says, if you have an additional benefit, lay it on us so that we can all benefit together. And this is why it's important for us to go back and read independently. So after we read what the author says about who Imam Maalik was, if you have a benefit, introduce, don't feel shy to present it. The explainer, Ash-Sharih, he says, Huwa al-Imam Maalik ibn Anas ibn Maalik ibn Abi Amr al-Asbahi. Right, Maalik ibn Anas ibn Malik ibn Abi Amir al-Asbahi. Malik ibn Anas ibn Malik, easy, ibn Abi Amir al-Asbahi. Right? Asbahi, he was from the people, and his tribe comes from the southern Arabs in Yemen. Right? Al-Asbahi from the southern Arabs in Yemen. Imam Dar al-Hijra. He was the Imam. No, I'm sorry. I'd have to double check that. I think they're originally from Yemen, but I have to double check. He was the Imam of Dar al-Hijra. He was the Imam of the place that Hijra was made to. Right? I.e. the Imam, this is one of his nicknames, Imam Dar al-Hijra. This is one of his nicknames. Najmus Sunan, the star of the Sunnah. This was another one of his nicknames. Right? They used to call him An-Najm. Right? Shafi'i said if they ask you who was like up there in Hadith, in their books of Hadith, Fan-Najm. Then it's the star. Then it's Imam Malik, right? Najmus Sunan, kama qala Shafi'i wa ghayruhu. And this was the nickname given to him by Shafi'i and other than him. Malik ibn Anas ibn Malik ibn Abi Amir al-Asbahi, the Imam of Dar al-Hijra, Najmus Sunan. طيب, we know his name. طيب. ولد بالمدينة سنة 93. He was born in Medina the year 93. He was born in Medina the year 93. وتوفي سنة 79 و100. And he died in the year 179. He died in the year 179. He was born 93, died 79. They say he was born the same year as Anas ibn Malik. Some of them say the year before, depending on what you say about about Anas's death, but around the time of Anas ibn Malik. And this is something you should always get in the habit of doing now that you're getting familiar with people. Link your people up based on other people, right? Anas died the same year Malik was born. So I can remember two birds with one stone, right? Abu Hurairah died the same year Shafi'i was born, right? So I can remember two birds with one stone, right? I can remember 2 years with one part, two people with 1 year, right? Tie your people together when you're memorizing dates of death and birth. He was born the year 93. He died in the year 179. وهو من الأئمة المعروفين المتبوعين أصحاب المذاهب الباقية إلى يومنا هذا. And he is from the 4 Imams, basically, right? Basic gist of what he just said is he is from the 4 Imams, from those famous madhabs that have reached us today. Were there other madhabs? Yeah, there were tons of madhabs. There were tons of other madhabs that might have been more popular during his time than his, right? But Allah chose that these madhabs that we have, the 4, are the ones that he chose to reach us with good preservation up until today. So he's one of the 4 Imams that their madhabs have reached us. وَلِمَذْهَبِهِ انْتِشَارٌ وَاسِعٌ فِي بِلَادِ الْمَغْرِبِ وَالْأَنْدُلُسِ وَلَهُ أَيْضٌ وُجُودٌ فِي الْعِرَاقِ وَفِي مِصْرِ وَغَيْرِهِمَا. طيب, he's one of the 4 Imams. Where is his madhab very popular? Western Islamic lands, Maghrib al-Arab. When they say al-Maghrib al-Arabi, what do you think? Do you think Morocco? Al-Maghrib, that's the country nowadays called Morocco, right? Al-Maghrib. That's not what is meant when you read in classical books and they say Al-Maghrib. When they say Al-Maghrib, it is what used to be called Africa. Say, when you think about Africa, what is Africa? No. Africa originally wasn't the continent of Africa. Africa originally was Libya and Tunis, right? So if you're on the continent of Africa, you have Egypt. It's that big Qatar, that's that big area. It's Egypt. That wasn't part of Africa, right? Africa, which is a Roman word in reality, or they say it comes from a Greek word, right? Africa was the area that the Muslims conquered after they exited out of Egypt. And they started going west. They conquered Libya and then Tunis. And after Tunis, you have what is known as al-Maghrib al-Arabi, the Arab West, And the Arab West would be like Algeria, Morocco, that whole side, Mauritania, all that northern Sahara area. All of that is what they called al-Maghrib al-Arabi. You had al-Maghrib al-Adna wal-Maghrib al-Aqsa, the close west and the far west. But when they say in the books that it was al-Maghrib, they're talking about what we think of northern Africa today, right? That's what they're referring to. And then you had an area known as Andalus. And everybody knows what Andalus is? What was Andalus? Spain. The entirety of the Iberian Peninsula, going up into the southern France and going east until I think you get to what's that called? Monte Carlo, whatever that is over there, like right outside, right before you get to Sweden and all that. We had all of that was a Muslim area known as Andalus. And so this is where his madhab was the most dominant. His madhab was the most dominant in northern Africa, in Spain, right? What we call al-Maghrib al-Arabi wa Andalus. But there were also those who followed his madhab from those who were in Iraq. Iraq was the Muslim capital at that time, the center of the Muslim world. That's where the Khalifa was, right? And so there are some who followed his madhab that it had prominence in that area as well. And that becomes important when you study the scholars of the madhab and see the different ways the madhabs looked. As well as in Africa. As well as in Egypt. There were those who followed him in Egypt, like we'll talk about in a second, inshallah. So if I ask you, where was his madhab prominent at? Where was it? Northern Africa, Spain. Did he have followers anywhere else? Mumtaz. Like today, different Muslim countries, you know, like how America has like a state flag and a state tree and a, you know what I mean? Like the bird of America is the bald eagle and things like that. Muslim countries, like the government has a madhab a lot of times that they follow. If I'm not mistaken, Haddathani Abu Muawiyah, all right, it's not, you know, you got a low isnad, you can go get it from him directly. Haddathani Abu Muawiyah that the official madhab of Kuwait is Maliki, right? The official madhab of Kuwait is Maliki. So it shows you that his madhab was famous. And one of the things about Imam Maalik is that he was known as Imam Madrasatu Ahl al-Hadith. He was the Imam of the school, the way of thinking of the people of Hadith. And this is just a benefit real quick. Do you guys know Ahl al-Hadith and Ahl al-Ra'i, the two different ways of thinking? Imam Maalik was the leader of what it was called Madrasatu Ahl al-Hadith, and Abu Hanifa was the leader of what was known as Madrasatu Ahl al-Ra'i, right? The people of view and opinion. And so these two imams were like the heads of their disciplines. And so it's no strangeness that their madhabs have been serviced and reached us today. Now, that's the introduction about who Imam Maalik was. We got his name, when he was born, when he died, and where he was famous at. Anybody have anything to add about Maalik? Anything you want us to know? And just bear in mind, like, it is not suitable. I will not be happy if every time we say, does anybody have something to add, and nobody has nothing to add, right? It's necessary that you do a little, even if you just Wikipedia, right? Read a little bit, show that if that's the tool that you have, bring something. And so that way we can all agree, because none of us can read everything. So since it's the first lesson, even though we announced it, we didn't announce how we're going to do it. I'll tolerate not knowing anything ahead of time. But in the future, we got to know something when we come, right? You got to be able to give me something about something. You with me? Okay, as long as you're with me, that's all I'm worried about. Play. Now that we talked about who Imam Maalik is, Maalik ibn Anas ibn Malik ibn Abi Amr al-Asbahi, we're going to talk about his book, a little bit about his book. The author, or the sharih, he says, ذكر ابن خلدون وغيره من المؤرخين أن أبا جعفر المنصور كان بمكان من العلم والدين قبل خلافته وبعدها، وأنه أشار على الإمام مالك بتأليف الموطأ فقال له يا أبا عبد الله إنه لم يبقى على وجه الأرض أعلم مني ومنك وإني قد شغلتني الخلافة فضع أنت للناس كتابا ينتفعون به تجنب فيه رخصة ابن عباس وشدائد ابن عمر. ووطئه للناس توطئة حتى قيل إن الإمام مالكا كان قال حينها ولقد علمني التصنيف يومئذ. So, paraphrasing, from the things that are unique about this book, the Muwatta, right? And I like to give a little quick introductory history lesson. One of the things that you should always be reading about when you're reading books of Hadith, especially, is getting familiarized with history, the environment that the book was written in, right? A lot of Muslims, we don't know, right? We might know a little bit about the Prophet's biography, and we probably know less about the Khulafa al-Rashidun. But then after that, we really get thin, right? If we say, who was the Khalifa after Muawiyah? Who was the Khalifa after Muawiyah? Yazid. Like, who was the Khalifa after Yazid? His son was his son. I don't know his son. Who is he? So these are things you want to get familiar with the environment of what's going on. So after Muawiyah, after Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, al-Hasan, these are the Khulafa al-Rashidun. Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, Ali, Hasan. Yes, Hasan is from the Khulafa al-Rashidun because the Prophet ﷺ, he said, al-Khilafatu al-Rashidiyya ba'di 30 'am. The rightly guided Khilafah after me is 30 years. And Hasan was the Khalifa for 6 months inside of that 30 years. And then he descended and gave the Khilafah to Muawiyah. Muawiyah was the first Muslim king. Why do they call him a Muslim king? Was he a bad guy? Was he an evildoer? Yalla ajibu. Was Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan a bad guy? No. He's a Sahabi. Radiyallahu anhu. The uncle of the Muslims. His sister, right, Habiba, was the wife of the Prophet ﷺ. His father, Abu Sufyan, was one of the leaders of Quraysh. Right? So it's not, a lot of times people make you think that Muawiyah was a bad guy or lesser than. No. As Muslims, we love Muawiyah. We have to love Muawiyah. He was the best king of the Muslim kings. Why do they call him a king? Obviously because of the hadith of the Prophet, that the Prophet, the rightly guided Khilafah after me is 30 years and then it will be a kingdom. And this is because he was the first one to make the succession in his bloodline. He was the first one to make the succession of leadership in his bloodline. Is that okay? Right? Can a leader appoint who he wants to be as the next leader? Yeah, that's from the rights of the leader, right? And so he was the first one to make that appointee in his bloodline, instead of necessarily looking at who might have been the best individual person in the Muslim world. And so that's why they changed from being a Khilafah al-Rashida into a kingdom. And so after Muawiyah was his son Yazid. And, obviously this is not the time or the place to discuss all of the bad marks on the rulership of Yazid. And then after Yazid was his son Muawiyah. But he died. He renounced being the Khalifa and said, find your own Khalifa. And find somebody else. I don't want it. And so at that moment, who took the pledge from everybody? Abdullah ibn Zubair. He was the Khalifa, right? If somebody comes to you and says, well, was Abdullah ibn Zubair a Khariji? Was he going against the rulers? Abdullah ibn Zubair, after Yazid, was the Khalifa. He was in the right. But there was an opposite group in Sham, in Damascus, which is the second Bani Umayyah. The second group of Bani Umayyah, and this was Marwan ibn al-Hakam. And so he clashed with Abdullah bin Zubair, and Allah decreed that Marwan ibn al-Hakam would be victorious. And so this is where the second kingdom of Bani Umayyah took charge. And after them, after Marwan, was his son Abdul Malik. And Abdul Malik was in his lineage, with the exception of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, who we're going to talk about later, was the Khilafah of Bani Umayyah until Bani Abbas. And I'm sure you all heard of Bani Abbas, right? And the most popular, or the you can say the founder, even though he wasn't the first, the founder of the Khilafah of Bani Abbas was Abu Ja'far Mansur, Abu Ja'far al-Mansur. And he was a classmate of Imam Maalik. One of the mistakes that people think is that the rulers at that time were ignorant, evil, bad people. right? They were human beings, and being a leader and a ruler comes with its difficulties. But Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, for example, was a scholar. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was a scholar. Abu Ja'far al-Mansur was a scholar in Islam, right? And so Abu Ja'far al-Mansur, who was the Khalifa of Bani Abbas, he told Imam Malik, why don't you write a book for the people that they can use for their religion? And don't put in it any of the strange opinions of Ibn Abbas. And don't put in it any of the extreme positions of Ibn Umar. Right? Ibn Abbas, strange opinions, because Ibn Abbas was, when you talk about the scholarship of that time, the two heads of the Sahaba at that time when they were young, because now they're the younger ones who have reached elderness, Ibn Abbas and Ibn Umar. Ibn Abbas, they might say, was more knowledgeable, but Ibn Umar was more worshiping, right? He was more aesthetic, right? He was more into ibadah. That's why their nicknames was al-Bahr, right? And I want to say al-Abid or al-Nasik, right? The nickname of Ibn Umar was al-Nasik. The point is, the more knowledge you have, your opinion seem what? Strange. They go against the common information. And the more you worship, your opinions seem what? Extreme, right? So he said, leave out of it the strange opinions of Ibn Abbas and leave out of it the difficult or the extreme positions of Ibn Umar, and make it easy for the people. Right? Lay it out for the people, make it simple for them. And so that's where it gets the name Muwatta. It's something that has been made flat and simple for the people. And Imam Malik, he said, I learned how to write a book that day. He taught me how to write a book, right? And so this is the origin story of the Muwatta. The Khalifa, Abu Ja'far Mansur, directed Malik to write a book for the people. The Shari, he goes on to say, وَالْمُوَطَّى ثَابِتُ النِّسْبَةِ إِلَى مُؤَلِّفِهِ. The Muwatta, there's no doubt that it is from the author. There's no doubt that the Muwatta is the book of Imam Malik. And we're going to talk about this later. There's going to be a conversation about this. But there's no doubt who wrote the Muwatta. Imam Malik. وَقَدْ طَبَقَتْ شُهْرَتُهُ الْآفَاقِ. And it's famous in all of the different countries in the world. Every madhab, every group of people, every student of knowledge would busy himself with the Muwatta. It's famous all over the world. وَرُوِيَ بِرِوَايَاتٍ مُتَعَدِّدَةٍ. And it has been narrated with multiple different chains going back to it. When we talk about this, how do our books reach us? This is something that a student should be aware of. And this is something that distinguishes Islam from other than it. That we are highly conscious of the history of our books. Classically, our books would reach us by, I go to the teacher, I listen to him, he tells me his book, he gives me permission to narrate it to other people. I might write it down, I might memorize it, and then I go tell it to other people, right? And that is known as Riwaayah, transmission. Like a teacher, Imam Malik was teaching his book for over 40 years, right? So how many students do you think he had over that 40-year period? Too many to be known. And that's why there's versions of the Muwatta that are in other books like Bukhari, Muslim, right? Where they have their versions of the Muwatta that those chains haven't reached us because the students of Imam Malik are too abundant to be counted, right? This is the Imam of Medina. Everybody who goes to Medina from all the way from West Africa coming to Medina, they're coming to Medina to do what? Meet Imam Malik. Right? And so his students, the versions of this book are abundant. وَقَدْ تَحَمَّلَهُ عَنَ الْإِمَامِ أَحْمَدِ. All of these students learned the book from Imam Ahmed and they read the book to him, right? They would read to Imam Malik. He wouldn't read it to them. They would sit and they would do like we're doing. We would memorize the book first or read the book first, have a friend who memorized it, write it down for us. And then we would go to Medina and we would say to Imam Malik that you said Anna bin Shihab az-Zuhri, right, said that Umar ibn Abdul Aziz delayed the salat one day. And they would go through the book like this, and Maalik would approve it. Or Maalik would come, and he had a reader who would sit and read the book to the people, and he would just sit there and listen to the reader read it and confirm it. And everybody who was there, it's as if they heard the book from who? Everybody who was there, it's as if they heard the book from Maalik. Because he was there while the reader was reading it, confirming and approving of everything he said. And that's a way of getting hadith called al-Arad, where you present to the teacher and the teacher listens. What else do we learn like that? What else do we learn in this fashion of presentation? So, the Quran, right? When you learn the Quran, does the teacher tell you or do you tell the teacher? You tell the teacher. You say, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alam. He says, right? No qalqala, right? Open your and close your mouth more with the ba, right? Like this. So it's similar. That's called adl. And this is a permissible way to acquire knowledge. And you'll learn more about that in the science of hadith. He says, so Imam Maalik, all of these students carried the book from Imam Maalik and they read it upon him. A large number of people read the book to him. وَقَدْ حُفِظَتْ بَعْضُ هَذِهِ الرِّوَايَاتِ. Some of these versions have been preserved up until today, right? Recently, and what I mean by recently is not in this current time, but time periods that are close to this current time, there were like 17 different versions that were common in circulation. Right now, there's about 10, if I'm not mistaken, 10 versions that have been printed, right? When we talk about printed books, there's 10 versions that have been printed, 10 different muwattas that have been printed. So the author is going to mention some of them. He says, the first of them, al-awwal, Riwaayah to Yahya ibn Yahya al-Masmudi al-Laythi. The first muwatta that's very common is the muwatta of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Masmudi al-Laythi. Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. Your homework is to find out when he died, right? We didn't mention when these people died. So your homework is to find out when he died. Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. And it is the version of the Muwatta that the most explanations are explaining his version. Most explanations of the Muwatta are explaining his version. Why are they explaining his version? They say the secret behind this is that where was Imam Maalik's madhab the most popular? Yeah. North Africa. Or what's the better word we use for it? Al-Maghrib. Yahya ibn Yahya in Andalus. Maghrib in Andalus. Yahya ibn Yahya, where was he from? Andalus. He was from Spain, right? SubhanAllah. This person so early in Islam, right? Early in Islam. He's meeting Imam Maalik who died 179. So he's meeting him early in Islam. Within the 2nd century, he's coming all the way from Spain to Medina to meet Maalik. And there's no airplanes, there's no helicopters, there's no there's boats, but there's no cars. Jazakumullah khair. About it? Jazakumullah khair. Allah yabarak feek. So, if he's from Andalus and he goes back with it, most of the people there are going to use his version. And since they were Maliki, they're going to do what with his version? Pay very good attention to it, memorize it, study it, teach it amongst themselves. And so that's why as Islam grew and there were more madhabs and people kind of, might have left off the Muwatta and giving it concern as much, in Maghrib, Imam Maalik's book was not only the book of hadith, but it was the book of the madhab. It was the madhab's book. And so there was a lot of preservation of it that made its versions, because there's multiple versions of this one, that made its versions the ones that the most concern was given to. So most people explain that version of the Muwatta. And that's the one that when somebody says the Muwatta nowadays, that's usually the Riwaayah that they're referring to. The Riwaayah of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. Now, he says, and the people of knowledge rely upon this version a lot. The second of them is the Riwaayah Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani. Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, right? Al-Hanafi, the student of Abu Hanifa. Your homework is, when did he die? Right? When did Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani, rahimahullah, pass away? And he is from the people who his Muwatta was very famous as well. Like, why was a Hanafi's version of the Muwatta so famous? Close. Because he was Hanafi, one of the things that stood out about his Muwatta is that he would do what? Mention the disagreement between Maalik and Abu Hanifa. And we said that these two people were the heads of their madrasa. So he would mention what he agreed about and what they disagreed about. And because this is a Hanafi, one of the founders of the Hanafi madhab, and Imam Malik's book is one of the foundational books of Hadith, their students gave it what? A lot of concern. Especially because the Imam, one of the Imams of the madhab, is commenting on it. And so it's like, we're going to use this source as one of our sources as well, even though it's by the Imam of a different madhab. And that reason the book was preserved. And it was one that was common and, well known amongst the people. And it has additions that aren't in the version of Yahya. It has narrations that aren't in the version of Yahya. And it has the commentary of Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Shaybani as well in it. And so that's a very valuable manuscript and a very valuable version of the Muwatta, which is printed, that gets you back early into Islam and how they used to go back and forth and things like that. And so he says, قَدْ انْفَرَدَتْ بِبَعْضِ الزِّيَادَاتِ. The version of Muhammad ibn al-Hasan, it's unique with certain additions that aren't anywhere else. You can find certain things in his version that you can't find in other versions, like the version of Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi. طيب, there's another version, another riwayah, and that is the riwayah of Abee Mus'ab az-Zuhri. And I'll talk about his biography when we get into the actual hadith. Abu Mus'ab az-Zuhri, rahimahullah ta'ala. And he has additions in his version as well. I'll talk more about his version when we actually get into the hadith. Right? If today, I don't think we'll reach the hadith today. So the brothers who didn't memorize, mashallah, you got an extra week. But we'll talk more about him and his version when we get into the hadith. Like, are there any other versions that have reached us that are printed? Yes. And I'm going to specifically talk about the ones that were printed, right? From them is the version of Yahya ibn Bukair al-Misri. I believe he died 183, the same year Abdullah ibn Mubarak died. Yahya ibn Bukair al-Misri. So he's from the early students of Imam Maalik. Right? If he died 183, Imam Maalik died 179, that's only 4 years difference. Right? And he was in Egypt. So he got the Muwatta early and then went to Egypt with it, right? So it's Yahya ibn Bukair al-Laythi is printed in 3 volumes, and it's the whole Muwatta from him. Alhamdulillah. Right? So if you see it out there, grab it. It's a good Muwatta. You have the Muwatta of Abdullah ibn Maslama ibn Ka'nab al-Ka'nabi, right? From the more prominent students of Imam Maalik, right? Al-Ka'nabi, they call him Abdullah ibn Maslama ibn Ka'nab ibn Ka'nab al-Ka'nabi, right? It's escaping me when he died. I want to say he died in the 180s as well, though. It's escaping me right now. But Al-Ka'nabi, he was very proficient and from like the stronger students of Imam Maalik, right? He was from the stronger students of Imam Maalik, and his Muwatta was widespread. A lot of people used his Muwatta. Like Abu Dawood used his Muwatta, right? Bukhari and Muslim, they narrated the Muwatta from this individual as well. right? Al-Ka'nabi, they narrated it from Al-Ka'nabi also. And if I'm not mistaken, his Muwatta is printed in one volume, and I believe it's complete. I believe it's complete or close to completion. Then there are other Muwatta'at that aren't as complete, right? We just have portions of them. From them is the portion of Abdullah ibn Wahb. And Abdullah ibn Wahb was from the students of Imam Maalik like that for a long time, from the close students of Imam Maalik. So, you know, his version of the Muwatta was one that was like, it was close because he was constantly with, I want to say he was with Imam Maalik for like over 20 years, right? As a student and being in his company for like a long time, even longer than Shafi'i. The Shafi'i was only with Imam Maalik, if I'm not mistaken, for like 8 to 10 years, right? And Shafi'i is actually one of the younger students of Imam Maalik, right? Because the Shafi'i was born when? We just said it. Now that's Maalik, 93. Shafi'i was born when? When did Abu Hanifa die? Khamsin wa Mi'a, 150. So Shafi'i was born 150. When did Imam Maalik die? 179. Shafi'i was born in Gaza, in Palestine. He moved to Mecca when I think he was about 6, right? 156 now. He grew up in Mecca, right? 160, he's 10 years old, right? He starts learning and doing all the things. He learned from Sufyan ibn Uyayna first and other scholars in Mecca. He goes out, let's say he's 18 when he goes out. Well, let's say he's 16. What year is it now? 166, right? And then he stays with Imam Maalik for the rest of that time, maybe till 176, 179, right? So he was only with Imam Maalik for maybe like 10 years, while Abdullah ibn Wahb was with him for like, if not mistaken, over 20 years. I want to say 18, if not more. The point of it is that Abdullah ibn Wahb, he was really close to Imam Maalik. And so we have a portion of his Muwatta. And it's printed alongside the Muwatta of Ibn al-Qasim. I believe Ibn al-Qasim has a portion of his Muwatta is printed alongside the Muwatta of Ibn Wahb in one volume. So they combined the two books in one book and printed each portion in the same cover. Likewise, there's Abdullah ibn Ziyad. He has a Muwatta that has reached us portions of it. Abdullah ibn Ziyad. And there is also Suwayd ibn Sa'id al-Hadathani. He has a Muwatta that has reached us as well as printed in one volume. So all of these are different versions of the Muwatta that are printed. If you go look on the bookstores, you can find them and buy them and collect them. And it's something that's nice to do, to have, to see where the differences are, where the similarities are, and to preserve the knowledge. Naam, we got not that much more, inshallah. I must be missing something. Now, not that much more. Yeah. So he says, وكان إمام مالك وغيرها كثير ذكر منها صاحب الحطة 16 رواية وأثبت بعض الزيادات التي في بعضها على بعض. He says that, and there's a person who wrote a book named Al-Hitta, Muhammad Sadiq Hassan Khan, right? A major scholar of contemporary times. He's not current, but within 100, 200 years. Muhammad Sadiq Hassan Khan, right? A major scholar. He was actually a prince or a king, but he was also a scholar, right? Muhammad Sadiq Hassan Khan. No. Yeah. Muhammad Sadiq Hassan Khan. Qunuji. He was like a prince or a king of his area, but he was also a scholar. He was very knowledgeable. Muhammad Sadiq Hassan Khan. He said there were 16 versions of the Muwatta that he reached, and he like established some of the differences between them, right? So that's contemporary time, up to 16 different versions that had reached us in manuscript form. He was from India, Muhammad Sadiq Hassan Khan, a very famous scholar. He goes on, he says, وَكَانَ الْإِمَامُ مَالِكٍ يَعْتَمِدُ فِي الرِّوَايَةِ طَرِيقَةِ الْعَرْضِ. Imam Maalik, he used to teach by way of ard, where the student would present to him. فَلَمْ يَكُنْ يَقْرَأَ عَلَى أَحَدٍ. So he would not read to any of his students. I think there is an exception, and I want to say it's Ibn Wahb. I have to go back to my biographies of Imam Maalik, but one of his students, he did read it to them, right, which was outside of the norm, right? And so that if it is Ibn Wahb, then that's one of the unique things about Ibn Wahb's version, that Imam Maalik read it to him instead of him reading it to Imam Maalik. But I have to double check that. He says, so Imam Maalik, he wouldn't read it to anyone. Instead, he used to criticize the students that would come and want him to read it to them, right? Some students would come, and because the hadith, the way it's compiled, people have different opinions about how you get the hadith, right? So some places didn't like certain ways as much as others. So for example, one way you could get a hadith is, this is my book, right? I say, here you go. Did I give you the hadith? Yeah. But I wrote them down for you. You didn't hear them from me. Maybe my pen slipped. Maybe somebody got to it before I gave it to you and I didn't read the whole book again before I gave it to you. This particular way is called munawala, right? Just giving you the hadith. You heard the hadith. Somebody told you I said the hadith. Maybe you didn't even hear from me. Maybe you heard it from somebody else and then came to me, right? Without telling me the hadith. And I said, yeah, what they told you is correct, right? Munawala. Az-Zuhri used to do this, right? He used to say, yeah, go ahead, you good, right? Another way is al-arf. They read it, the teacher listens and approves it. But maybe the reader something was bad about him. Maybe he wasn't as righteous as the teacher, right? So it's a disconnect kind of to some people, because I heard it from the reader. I didn't hear it from the teacher. Maybe the teacher wasn't paying attention that one word, right? Maybe an elephant came to Medina and distracted everybody, right? Which happened, right? An elephant came to Medina and distracted everybody except Imam Maalik, right? He got mad at everybody getting distracted by the elephant. The point is that maybe he didn't pay attention. And so is that as good as me hearing it directly from the teacher? And so some students would want Imam Maalik to read it to them, to which he would refuse, and criticize them, right? He would criticize them for this request. فَقَدْ كَانَ يَأْتِي إِلَيْهِ طُلَّابٌ مِّمَّنْ لَا يَرَى الْعَرْضُ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْعِرَاقِ. Right? People would come from Iraq to learn the Muwatta from Imam Maalik, and they didn't hold the opinion that you can listen to the teacher's, somebody reading to the teacher. You got to hear it from him. And so they would say, no, read it to us directly. We're coming from Iraq. We came from so far away. Let us hear it directly from your voice. And he would criticize them, use juruhum and reprimand them. And he would say, how is it not good enough with the hadith that you read it to me and I approve it, when you all do this with the Quran, and the Quran is greater, right? So just like you can read in front of your teacher and let him approve the hadith, the Quran to you, then you can read in front of me and I can approve the hadith to you. Now, the last, he says, وَمَعْلُومٌ أَنَّ الْقُرْآنِ يُقْرَأُ عَلَى الْمُقْرِئِ وَالْعَرْضُ طَرِيقٌ مُعْتَبَرٌ مِنْ طُرُقِ السَّمَاعِ عند أهل العلم وحصل الإجماع على صحته. He just says in conclusion to that point, there's a consensus that reading to the teacher is good enough. And usually in hadith, how do you know the difference? Haddathana, or some version of it, is the teacher said it. Akhbarana, or some version of it, is somebody read it upon the teacher. This is usually the case. And that's why you see there's always a difference when you say haddathana and akhbarana and an and anna and qala, right, and anba'ana. All of these things, there's a difference in the ways that the hadith is transmitted that the student should be aware of. And we're going to see a lot of that in this book. Now, he says, وَحَصَلَ الْإِجْمَاعُ عَلَى صِحَّةِ مَا نُقِلَ مِنْهُ مَا نُقِلَ بِوَاسِطَةٍ وَإِنْ كَانَ الْأَصْلُ فِي الرِّوَايَةِ هُوَ السَّمَاعُ. Now, so after that, the last thing he's going to mention, he says, he mentions two more things. He says, وَيُعَدُّ الْمُوَطَّأُ سَادِسُ الْكُتُبِ عِنْدَ جَمْعٍ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْعِلْمِ وإن كان متقدما عليها من حيث الزمان وكذلك من حيث إمامة مؤلفه ومكانته وتأخرت رتبته عن الصحيحين والسنن لما فيه من البلاغات والمراسيل والموقوفات والمقطوعات والنوع الآخر في الموطأ منه شيء كثير وهذا ما ذهب إليه ابن الأثير في جامع الأصول ورزين العبدري في تجريد الصحاح. He says the Muwatta is the sixth book of Al-Kutub As-Sitta. The Muwatta is book number 6 from the 6 books. What's book number 1? Bukhari. What's book number 2? Muslim. Like, what's book number 3? Abu Dawood or Nasa'i? Right? There's disagreement. Right? And some people even say Tirmidhi, but it's not Tirmidhi. Right? But it's Abu Dawood. But some people say, no, Nasa'i is better than Abu Dawood. His book is better than Abu Dawood's book. And they say it's close to Muslim's book. But Abu Dawood, I like Abu Dawood, the third one. Right? Then Nasa'i, Abu Dawood. Whichever one you said was third, the next one is fourth. Then Tirmidhi. Right? And each of these 6 books has something that makes it better than the others. Each of these books has something that makes it better than the others. Even something that makes it better than Bukhari. Right? It doesn't mean it's more authentic. It just means, like Muslim, his book is better organized than Bukhari's. Abu Dawood covers all of the fiqh. And Nasa'i covers like the ilal, the subtle hidden weaknesses in hadith. Tirmidhi teaches you in his book and mentions the other narrations. Right? So what's book number 6? Huh? In the early generations, the Muwatta was book number 6. Right? Depends on with who. But when we say the 6 books nowadays, most people don't count the Muwatta. But early on, the 6th book was the Muwatta. And if you're reading one of the books that was written during that period or developed from that period, the 6th book to them is Muwatta. He says, so early, the Muwatta is the 6th of the 6 books of the people with a group of the scholars. Even though it's number 6, even though it's earlier, and the Imam of the Muwatta is greater than all of the other Imams of the 6. Why is that? How is Imam better than Bukhari, Muslim, Abu Dawud, Tirmidhi, Nasa'i? How is he better than them? You don't know? Huh? He's from the Qurun al-Mufaddala. He's from those 3 generations that the Prophet mentioned directly. The best of people are my generation, and then the ones after them, and then the ones after them. Imam Maalik, without a doubt, is from that 3rd generation, the Atba' al-Tabi'in. So he's from that preferred generation. There's nobody between him and the Prophet except 2 levels, right? The highest Bukhari gets is 3, right? So that Bukhari is high up, right? Bukhari actually catches up to his teacher like Imam Ahmed, right? The highest Muslim gets is 4, right? And they disagree, does Abu Dawood have a 3 or not, right? And then you got Tirmidhi 4, Nasa'i, I think he catches up in 4 as well, right? But the point is, Imam Maalik is higher up than them in honor and nobility. He's more prestigious than all of them. And he was earlier than them, but in spite of that, his book is behind theirs in order. From the aspect of which is the stronger book or the better book, right? What do we mean behind them? Meaning, if we're talking about the best book, what's the best book after the Quran? Bukhari. And if you're not going to do Bukhari, then do Muslim, right? And then after that, what's the next book? Abu Dawood, Nasa'i, or Muwatta. Some people say it's number 3 when we talk about authenticity. But why do they put it at the back of the line? The reason they put it at the back of the line is because of what is in the Muwatta from things that aren't hadith. So in the Muwatta, Imam Maalik, he mentions hadith that somebody's missing in the chain. Whether it's a tabi'i saying the Prophet said something directly, or somebody under the tabi'in saying the Prophet said something directly. The first one is called mursal. The second one is called munqati'. Munqati', right? And then you have things where he mentions just the statement of the Sahaba. That's not a hadith at all. That's called mawquf. And sometimes he mentions the statement of the tabi'i or other than the tabi'i, which is called maqtu', right? And then sometimes he mentions things that he heard, right? I heard this and that and the third, right? It's similar to a ta'liq of Bukhari, where he just mentions something about the Prophet that he heard being in Medina. No, I heard this, but he doesn't mention any chain for it. And so that can be problematic because we don't know the validity of this information on the surface. And so all of those things, also he mentions in it his opinion, right? What he thinks about the issue, or the scholars that he took from, what they think about the issue. And so because of all of that other stuff in his book, and it wasn't just a book of hadith, that's why they put it at the end of the line. Because the other books are mostly and predominantly just books of what the Prophet said, did, or approved of. But this book has all of that other stuff in it. Does that make the book worse? Right? It makes it worse from the aspect of it's not just a book of hadith, but it makes it better from the aspect of what it preserved for us from all of that other information. And all of the different types of books of hadith are really just reworkings of one aspect of the Muwatta. You talk about Bukhari's the most authentic book. All he did was just rework the authenticity of the Muwatta. You talk about Abu Dawood is a book that compiled every type of sunnah. All he did was just rework the fiqh of the Muwatta, right? You talk about the Musannaf of Ibn Abi Shayba, it's just reworking an aspect of the Muwatta, right? You talk about the books of fiqh of Abu Hanif and his students and things like that. All it is just the reworking of the Muwatta, to the extent that Imam Maalik beat all of them to that. You see what I'm saying? And so even though it's behind them from one aspect, it's in front of them from other aspects. And so it's the sixth of the 6 books. This was the opinion of Ibn al-Athir in a book known as Jami al-Usul, which is an important book for a student to have, as well as the opinion of Ruzayn al-Abdari in his book, Stripping Away Authenticity, or breaking it down to just the authentic books, Tajrid al-Siha, breaking down the authentic books. Other people said no, Imam Malik's book isn't number 6. There's a different book that's number 6. He says, وَذَهَبَ آخَرٌ إِلَى عَدِّ سُنَنِ الدَّارِمِ الْكِتَابِ السَّادِسِ بَدْلًا عَنِ الْمُوَطَّأِ. And that's the sunan of Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman al-Darimi. No, Abdullah ibn Abdurrahman al-Darimi. He has a book known as Musnad al-Darimi or Sunan al-Darimi. And they say that this book is number 6 because of the authenticity of it. It's a very strong book. And he died in the year 255. Now, 255, he was a contemporary of Bukhari and them. So he says some people consider his book to be number 6 instead of the Muwatta of Imam Maalik. And that's a good book for us to go over at some point in time. It's a small book, right? It has more hadith than the Muwatta, but it's still a small book. I think it's only like 1,000 and some change. But it's a good book. It's considered to be one of the authentic books. وَذَهَبَ فَرِيقٌ, and there's a third group that says that the 6th book is Ibn Majah. And that's what most people nowadays say when they talk about the 6 books. They say book number 6 is the Sunan of Ibn Majah, right? And they say that this is because what Ibn Majah has from numerous additions, right? Ibn Majah is the weakest of them all regarding his condition and like how many weak hadith are in it. But he has a lot of extra hadith that aren't in the other 6 or the other 5. And so that's why a lot of people add his book as the 6th book. He says, إلى تقديم سنن ابن ماجه على الاثنين والأول من أضافه إلى الخمسة الفضل بن طاهر في شروط الأئمة وفي أطرافه ثم جرى العمل على ذلك لكثرة زوائده من الأحاديث المرفوعة. نعم. He says, ويشتمل الموطأ. Okay, here he's talking about how many narrations are in the Muwatta, and he's not being precise. Nor is preciseness something you can actually do because there's different versions. But he says, as far as the actually connected hadith in Muwatta, there's only about 600. And we'll look at our version when we go over to see how many actual hadith are in it, where it's a connected chain to the Prophet. But he says it's only about 600. And so it's not that many to memorize, but we still got to memorize everything else too. But he says you have the hadith with disconnected chains and the statements of the Sahaba and the statements of the Tabi'een and the statements of Imam Maalik, that which is about 1,800. Right? And so altogether is about 2,000 and some change in the Muwatta, right? Depending on which version. Now, but like we say, he's not being precise. He says, وَقَدْ ائْتَنَا أَهْلُ الْعِلْمِ he says, وَيَشْتَمِلُ الْمُوَطَّأ عَلَى 600 حديث موصول وعلى مثلها من البلاغات والمقاطع وعلى مثلهما من أقوال الإمام مالك ومن قبله من شيوخه فهو يشتمل على ما يقارب 2000 من الأخبار. نعم. وقد اعتنى أهل العلم بالموطأ عناية فائقة حتى ذكر من شروحه أكثر من 100 شرح مما هو موجود الآن في خزانة الكتب وقد طبع كثير منها لكن طالب العلم هو في غمار هذه الأعداد الهائلة من التصنيفات في مجالات السنة وشروحها لا يمكنه الإحاطة بجميع ما كتب حول هذا الكتاب أو غيره فيكفيه أن يقتصر على بعض هذه الشروح ومنها ما يأتي. He says that the scholars have given a lot of effort to the Muwatta of Imam Malik, right? Every generation, every group of scholars, every method, every discipline, they've serviced this book in some way. And so there's over 100 different explanations of the Muwatta of Imam Malik in the libraries of the Muslims. And that's not an exaggeration, right? The only book that I might say rivals it and the amount of service it has gotten is what? Besides the Quran, obviously. The Quran is the Kalam of Allah. What book do you think might rival it in the amount of service it has got? Bukhari, right? Bukhari has, it's a toss-up, but Bukhari, pretty much every generation, every decade, every group of, any scholar has did some type of work on Bukhari or the Muwatta, right? Explaining it, summarizing it, extracting its hadith, talking about its people, something like that. So this shows you the value of the book, the amount of service it has gotten. The value of the book, a lot of times you can tell by the service it has gotten. And you want to learn a book that has been serviced very well because you feel the reliability of that book and the information of that book is going to be easier and more accessible, especially through the different generations. But if that's the case, the student can't know all hundreds of these explanations. You might not even know the names of them, let alone everything that's in them. And if you try to encompass it all, you be exhausted and overburdened and overwhelmed. So it's not necessary or even suitable that the student tries to figure all of them out and read all of them and learn all of them. Instead, there's a certain amount of them that are more important than others. There's certain explanations that are more important than others. So he says the first of them is at-Tamheed. And at-Tamheed is by Abu Yusuf, Abu Umar Yusuf ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Barr al-Namari, rahimahullah ta'ala. Abu Umar Yusuf ibn Abdullah ibn Abdul Barr al-Namari, who died in the year 463. Abu Yusuf is a scholar, a Maliki scholar from Cordova, Spain, from Cordoba. And he explained it in this book called At-Tamheed, which is the best explanation of the Muwatta, hands down. There's no argument. Not only is it the best explanation of the Muwatta, it's one of the best books of hadith of all time, right? There's certain books that are like, they shaped Islamic history. Bukhari, Tafsir al-Tabari, Mughni by Ibn Qudama. Al-Muwatta is one of those books, right? Al-Muwatta is one of those books that you have to have, right? You're not going to read it maybe every day, but you got to have it. Like this book, you got to have it. The Muwatta of al-Imam Ibn Abdul Barr, rahimahullah ta'ala. So he explained it, and he was known as Hafid al-Maghrib. And he explained it in this book, which is organized according to Imam Malik's teachers. He didn't explain it the way the book is written. He explained it by breaking the hadith down according to Imam Malik's teachers. And by doing that, he kind of made it difficult when it didn't need to be. Because he doesn't talk about the hadith as they come. He'll talk about the hadith of Imam Malik's teachers alphabetically. And even the alphabetically is according to the alphabetic organization of the people in Al-Maghrib. Which is different than Alif, Ba, Ta, Tha, Jim, Ha, Kha. They have a different organization of their alphabet. So when you're reading his book, you got to know the Imam Malik's teacher, and you got to know the organization of the alphabet according to the Maghariba, and so it can make it difficult. For that reason, other people reorganized his book. Like this version right here is somebody's reorganization of the book according to the Muwatta, where they reorganized everything that Ibn Abdul Barr did and just put it in order of the hadith that he explained. But that can still make it hard because he might talk about something in a different hadith that connects to this hadith. Another book that he wrote, organized the way Imam Maalik wrote the book, is a book called al-Istidhkar. So he wrote another book, but al-Istidhkar, although it's still important, he has additions in it. It's as if he took the Tamheed and put it in order. So it's a good book if you just want to get more of the fiqh understanding without all of the hadith type of stuff. Now, so that's Ibn Abdul Barr's explanation. He says, أولها التمهيد لما في الموطأ من المعاني والأسانيد لحافظ المغربي أبي عمر يوسف بن عبد الله بن عبد البر النمري المتوفى سنة 63 و400 وقد مكث في تأليفه قرابة 30 عام. He stayed 30 years writing that book at Tamheed, right? 30 years writing it. فخرج الكتاب محررا منقحا مضبوطا متقنا حتى قال ابن حزم وغيره لا أعلم في الكلام على فقه الحديث مثله أصلا فكيف أحسن منه. Ibn Hazm, he said, I don't know any book better talking about the understanding of hadith. I don't know any book like it. I don't know any book like it. So how could I know any book better than it? Right? And then he says, فالكتاب مرتب على شيوخ مالك وأسمائهم مرتبة على حروف التهجي عند المغاربة وهي تختلف عن ترتيب المشارقة وكانت الأمنية أن يرتب الكتاب على الأبواب تبعا للترتيب الكتاب الأصلي ثم حصلت هذه الأمنية آخرا وهذا الكتاب ينبغي لطالب العلم أن يعنى به. ثانيا الاستذكار الجامع لمذاهب الفقهاء الأنصار لابن عبد البر كذلك ورتبه على أبواب الموطأ وهو من الشروح التي لا يستغني عنها طالب العلم. Right, so he mentioned those two explanations, al-Tamheed and al-Istidhkar. Right, this is the other book by Ibn Abdul Barr, al-Istidhkar. Right, and so this is a good book to have as well. Another book that I still have yet to grab is, he says, وَثَالِثًا الْمُنْتَقَى شَرْحِ الْمُوَطَّى, the selected explanation of al-Muwatta by Abee al-Walid al-Baji. Abee al-Walid al-Baji. And this is a good book. One of the things that is good about this book is that he explains some of the different versions of the Muwatta in it as well. Where Ibn Abdul Barr, you find him explaining the version of Yahya bin Yahya. Al-Baji, he explains some of the other riwayat as well. So when you're reading the Muwatta and you're reading a different version, you might find what you're looking for in the explanation of Al-Baji, Abu al-Walid al-Baji. He says, وَهُوَ كِتَابٌ نَفِيسٌ نَافِعٌ وَهُوَ مَطْبُوعٌ فِي 7 مُجَلَدَاتٍ. It's 7 volumes, the print that is out right now. وَقَدْ اخْتَصَرَهُ مِنْ كِتَابٍ لَهُ كَبِيرٍ اسْمُهُ الْإِسْتِيفَاء. And Al-Baji had a bigger explanation. Unfortunately, it's lost. But the bigger explanation, he selected this 7-volume explanation from that bigger book called Al-Istifa. A 4th explanation, he says, Al-Qabs fi Sharh al-Muwatta, Imam Maalik ibn Anas, the Abi Bakr ibn al-Arabi. Right? Abu Bakr ibn al-Arabi, a famous Maliki scholar, he had a book called Al-Qabs, which was an explanation of the Muwatta. He says another book, Al-Khamis, or Khamisan, Tanwir al-Hawalik. Tanwir al-Hawalik by Imam al-Suyuti. Suyuti had a small explanation of the Muwatta. And I thought about using that one because he just basically focuses on the vocabulary without getting too deep into things. وهو شرح مختصر جدا, but it's very abridged. It's very summarized. He said, سادسا, a 6th book is شرح موطأ الإمام مالك للزرقاني. Az-Zurqani, rahimahullah, is an individual who explained the Muwatta in a medium-sized book. سابعا أوجس المسالك. Awjas al-Masalik is authored by Al-Kana Dahlawi, right? A scholar from India, and it is a long explanation of the Muwatta. It's a big explanation of the Muwatta. It's 15 volumes, and it's a good book, he says. And one of the things that is unique about his explanation is that he goes back to the sources when he's talking about the different schools of thought. So instead of him just saying, so-and-so says this, he tells you where he got the information from their books, which is an important thing for a student to do when you're transmitting the Shafi'i say this, the Hanbali say that, the Maliki say that. Go to their books, right? Because if not, you might just say what you heard somebody else saying, and that's not really their madhab, right? And that's abundant. A lot of us do that. Like I like to point it out, like with the Hanafi madhab, A lot of times we do stuff like that. We'll say that the Hanafis they have this crazy madhab or this and that and the third. When you look back at their foundations, like al-Asl, you'll find that there's a lot of similarities between the early Salaf, whether they were Hanafi or Maliki or Shafi'i, right? And it doesn't mean they didn't have differences, but you'll find that there are a lot of similarities because they all had the same objective, and Allah knows best. Now, he mentions some things about that. We'll skip over that. He says, Thaminan al-Musawwa. The last explanation he mentions is a book called al-Musawwa fi Sharh al-Muwatta. Al-Musawwa is another book by Waliullah al-Dahlawi, another Indian scholar, who he printed it in 2 volumes. And he mentions in every topic the opinions of Maalik, Abu Hanifa, and Shafi'i as well. And right now they're working on it. Abdul Karim mentions in another place, they're working on it in a study for a master's degree in one of the universities. I think Imaam Muhammad bin Saud. It's a master's thesis that's being worked on right now, where they're verifying it and also adding to it the opinions of Imam Ahmed and all the issues. So that's a good book when you want to have comparative fiqh based on what's mentioned in the Muwatta. So these are some of the things that the author mentioned in his introduction. And like this, we'll start next week with the first hadith that we mentioned today, and that we'll memorize next week. قال يعني أبو مصعب az-Zuhri أن ابن شهاب رحمه الله تعالى عن ابن شهاب أن عمر بن عبد العزيز أخر الصلاة يوما فدخل عليه عروة بن الزبير فأخبره أن المغيرة بن شعبة أخر الصلاة يوما وهو بالكوفة فدخل عليه أبو مسعود الأنصاري فقال ما هذا يا عروة أليس قد علمت أن جبريل نزل فصلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم صلى 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 رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم ثم قال بهذا أمرت قال عمر لعروة اعلم ما تحدث يا عروة إن جبريل هو أقام لرسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وقت الصلاة فقال عروة كذلك كان بشير بن أبي مسعود يحدث عن أبي قال عروة ولقد حدثتني عائشة زوج النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يصلي العصر والشمس في حجرتها قبل أن تظهر. نعم شيخنا. Remind me your name again, I forget, I'm sorry. Shafi, that's right. Can you read the English one for us? Just read it for us, inshallah. Yes, right. Stop at 3. Yeah, stop at 3.
1.1, the times of prayer. He said Yahya ibn Yahya
Laythi.
had delayed the prayer one day while he was in Kufa, and Abu Mas'ud al-Ansari had gone to him and asked, "What is this you hear? Do you not know that the angel Jibril came down and prayed, and the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed, and he prayed again, and then the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed, and he prayed again, and then the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed, and he prayed again, and then the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed, and then he prayed again, and then the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam prayed, and then he said, "This is what I was ordered to do." Umar ibn al-Aziz then said, "Be sure what you relate, or what? Was it definitely Jibril who established the times of the prayer for the messenger of Allah?" Urwa replied, "That is how it was related to Bashir ibn Abi Mas'ud al-Ansari by his father." Urwa said, "Aisha, the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, related to me that the messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to pray Asr while the sunlight was pouring into her room, before the sun itself had become visible.
نعم.
Because it was still high in the sky.
جزاكم الله خيرا. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على عبده ورسوله نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.